Following through, so we start off with the characteristics this time of quantitative research, and so we're just gonna go over six major characteristics, and for each characteristics, I will be discussing a little bit, and after that, we go over to qualitative research, and kind of like combining or looking at these characteristics side by side at the end as we compare and contrast the differences of these characteristics. So, all right. So the first set, I'm gonna turn off my camera right now so that you can see all the text. Sorry. All right. So going back to the quantitative research characteristics. So the first research characteristic of quantitative designs or research, or is that the research problem is through description of trends and a need for explanation for relationships. Two things I would like to highlight. One is trends, another is relationships. So trends basically is kung ano yung what is the characteristics of a particular sample or particular group. Okay, so that's trends. Or yeah, relationship among variables is we can see that again no in the correlational design that I discussed a while back, where one variable is related to another and they kind of like predict one another, and we can see the relationship of this variable to the other to another variable. Now, another highlight that I would like to see here is that variables are constructs. Constructs are basically concepts that are well established, say, for example, motivation, intelligence, or attitude, or say, performance in education. And all these things, once it has a means of measure to quantify that particular construct, that construct becomes a variable because you are able to provide a measure for that. So say variable of what is like a variable? Gender is a variable. Grade level is a variable. But these kinds of variables have different types. You have categorical variable. We have ordinal variables. We also have scalar or scale variables, or what we call as I forgot. It starts with letter I. And the last one is ratio, or the variable that has an absolute zero. So these kinds of variables, you can actually compare them. You can actually create relationships with them and stuff like that. So that is a variable. Moving on to the next. So first is that in quantitative research, we are about describing trends and explaining relationships among variables. Second point about quantitative research characteristic is that the RRL has a major role in directing basically your purpose of doing the study and justifying the research problem. Why? Because again, if the quantitative research is about trends and relationship to variables, of course, you have to be able to see somewhere the possibility that such variables are in fact related, right? So if more or less it has been known that such kind of relationship exists, even if it's not in quantitative nature, you're able to justify that we have to test this, right? So yeah, that's where you get your gap for the research. You have to be able to say justify again the problem by looking at the literature. So hindi po pwede, it's not possible that you have a quantitative research tapos your RRL is very kulang, no? So very important yan in a quantitative research. Another is in quantitative research, when you create your purpose statements or research questions, kailangan po it is specific narrow, measurable, and observable. O, di ba? So like, di ba, you've heard of statistics, right? In statistics, we do inferential statistics where we test specific hypotheses. Pag magte-test tayo ng specific hypothesis, very specific yan. No? So for example, sinabi natin, the relationship between motivation and performance. You're gonna stick to motivation and performance, right? So it's that specific. Like it's the period is period, parang ganun, no? Of course, you're gonna have to narrow it down. Otherwise, it's gonna be a lot, no? Kasi kailangan kasi na specific siya. So dapat pag specific, tag-iisa-isa lang. Hindi siya pwedeng pagmaramihan. Pag mamaramihan na, it becomes a very complex. Yes, pwede pa naman na pamaramihan, pero very complex na yung quantitative analysis na gagawin mo. And of course, measurable. Kasi we're dealing with variables. And what did I say about variables? These are constructs that has quantitative measures. So, kailangan measurable siya. Kung hindi valid yung measurement mo, walang saysay. Walang saysay. Char. Sige. Another thing is that it should be observable, because if it's not observable, how can you measure that? Right? So, yeah. So these are the first set of characteristics of quantitative research. Going on, moving forward, we're gonna, it has been pretty established, I think, already that quantitative research is about numbers, quantities, right? Obvious naman talaga, di ba? But again, it's about collecting numeric data with large number of people. Kasi we are after generalizability. We are after pangkalahatan in quantitative studies. So we can say that we kind of like standardize particular relationship of variables. That's why it has to come from a large number of people. And for its data analysis, you have to analyze trends, right? Compare groups, relating variables using statistical analysis, and interpreting results by comparing them with prior predictions and past research. So I think it's quite self-explanatory. I'm not going to be dwell more on that. Ito yung last na point. Writing a research report using a standard fixed structures and evaluation criteria, and taking an objective and unbiased approach. So ito yung pinaka parang not really like the defining characteristics, but it's one of them, like parang distinguishing qualities of or characteristic of a quantitative research. Kasi dapat you are hands off, like figuratively hands off with the research. It means that you have to let the data speak for itself. Hindi po pwede na kung ano yung iniisip mo, what you think about the data is the result of your research. It's not a valid conclusion, right? So kailangan you are unbiased, no? Kaya nga you have to have control, you have to have randomization, you have to have, all of those constraints so that you can generalize your result. So ito yung second set of characteristics for quantitative research. Review nga natin what is the first. Okay, what is the first characteristic na meron ang quantitative research? Una is that it has to describe, no? Nagde-describe siya. It is describing trends and explaining relationship among variables. Pangalawa, the RRL plays a major role in shaping and justifying its purpose. Third, its statements, purpose statements, research questions, and hypotheses are specific, narrow, measurable, and observable. Pang-apat is that you have to collect numerical data from large number of people. Fifth is that to analyze the quantitative research, you should analyze trends, compare groups, relate variables, and use a statistical analysis. And you interpret results by comparing them with prior predictions and past research. And finally, kailangan unbiased tayo, objective, right, in our quantitative research. So that's for quantitative research.